Hello there. Good evening, Evelyn and Ellen and Mary and A. Giggles. I saw those names before I sat down. I'm Gildart, and welcome to Fireside Reading, where every day I sit in front of the fire and read a chapter or two of a lovely old book to those who might like to join us. We have 4 more days left on The Sun Also Rises. And after that, I'm going to take the weekend, and actually, I think I'm going to, from now on, read on weekdays. I'm going to conduct a little experiment. I'm always interested in seeing whether we can get some more people to find and stick with fireside reading. And I'm wondering if the fact that we do it every day is just a little bit too much. So I'm going to do a little experiment. And for the next book, not entirely sure what that's going to be, but well, I won't say it now, but I think I know, but I'll tell you tomorrow. For the next book, I'm going to read weekdays only, and we will see how we enjoy that. Please let me know your thoughts about that prospectively and as we go along. I'm going to try that. All right, let's find out what happens, shall we? Welcome to a fireside reading of The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway. Chapter 18, Part 1. At noon, we were all at the cafe. It was crowded. We were eating shrimps and drinking beer. The town was crowded. Every street was full. Big motor cars from Biarritz and San Sebastian kept driving up and parking around the square. They brought people for the bullfight. Sightseeing cars came up too. There was one with 25 English women in it. They sat in the big white car and looked through their glasses at the fiesta. The dancers were all quite drunk. It was the last day of the fiesta. The fiesta was solid and unbroken, but the motor cars and tourist cars made little islands of onlookers. When the cars emptied, the onlookers were absorbed into the crowd. You did not see them again except as sport clothes, odd-looking at a table among the closely packed peasants in black smocks. The fiesta absorbed even the Biarritz English, so that you did not see them unless you passed close to a table. All the time there was music in the street. The drums kept on pounding and the pipes were going. Inside the cafes, men with their hands gripping the table or on each other's shoulders were singing the hard-voiced singing. "Here comes Brett," Bill said. I looked and saw her coming through the crowd in the square, walking, her head up as though the fiesta were being staged in her honor, and she found it pleasant and amusing. "Hello, you chaps," she said. "I say, I have a thirst." "Get another big beer," Bill said to the waiter. "Shrimps?" "Is Cone gone?" Brett asked. "Yes," Bill said. "He hired a car." The beer came. Brett started to lift the glass mug, and her hand shook. She saw it and smiled and leaned forward and took a long sip. "Good beer." "Very good," I said. I was nervous about Mike. I did not think he had slept. He must have been drinking all the time, but he seemed to be under control. "I heard Cone had hurt you, Jake," Brett said. "No, knocked me out, that was all." "I say he did hurt Pedro Romero," Brett said. "He hurt him most badly." "How is he?" "He'll be all right. He won't go out of the room." "Does he look badly?" "Very. He was really hurt. I told him I wanted to pop out and see you chaps for a minute." "Is he going to fight?" "Rather." "I'm going with you, if you don't mind." "How's your boyfriend?" Mike asked. He had not listened to anything that Brett had said. Brett's got a bullfighter, he said. She had a Jewish chap named Coon, but he turned out badly. Brett stood up. I am not going to listen to that sort of rot from you, Michael. How's your boyfriend? Damned well, Brett said. Watch him this afternoon. Brett's got a bullfighter, Mike said. A beautiful bloody bullfighter. Would you mind walking over with me, Jake? I want to talk to you. Tell him all about your bullfighter, Mike said. Oh, to hell with your bullfighter! He tipped the table so that all the beers and the dishes of shrimps went over in a crash. Come on, Brett said. Let's get out of this. In the crowd crossing the square, I said, How is it? I'm not going to see him after lunch until the fight. His people come in and dress him. They're very angry about me, he says. Brett was radiant. She was happy. The sun was out and the day was bright. I feel altogether changed, Brett said. You've no idea, Jake. Anything you want me to do? No, just go to the fight with me. We'll see you at lunch. No, I'm eating with him. We were standing under the arcade at the door of the hotel. They were carrying tables out and setting them up under the arcade. Want to take a turn out on the park? Brett asked. I don't want to go up yet. I fancy he's sleeping. We walked along past the theatre and out of the square and along through the barracks of the fair, moving with the crowd between the lines of booths. We came out on a cross street that led to the Paseo de Sarasate. We could see the crowd walking there, all the fashionably dressed people. They were making the turn at the upper end of the park. Don't let's go there, Brett said. I don't want staring at just now. We stood in the sunlight. It was hot and good after the rain and the clouds from the sea. I hope the wind goes down, Brett said. It's very bad for him. So do I. He says the bulls are all right. They're good. Is that San Fermin's? Brett looked at the yellow wall of the chapel. Yes, where the show started on Sunday. Let's go in. Do you mind? I'd rather like to pray a little for him or something. We went in through the heavy leather door that moved very lightly. It was dark inside. Many people were praying. You saw them as your eyes adjusted themselves to the half-light. We knelt at one of the long wooden benches. After a little, I felt Brett stiffen beside me and saw she was looking straight ahead. Come on, she whispered throatily. Let's get out of here. Makes me damned nervous. Outside in the hot brightness of the street, Brett looked up at the treetops in the wind. The praying had not been much of a success. Don't know why I get so nervy in church, Brett said. Never does me any good. We walked along. I'm damned bad for a religious atmosphere, Brett said. I've the wrong type of face. You know, Brett said, I'm not worried about him at all. I just feel happy about him. Good. I wish the wind would drop, though. It's liable to go down by 5 o'clock. Let's hope. You might pray. I laughed. Never does me any good. I've never gotten anything I prayed for. Have you? Oh, yes. Oh, rot, said Brett. Maybe it works for some people, though. You don't look very religious, Jake. I'm pretty religious. Oh, rot, said Brett. Don't start proselyting today. Today's going to be bad enough as it is. It was the first time I had seen her in the old, happy, careless way since before we set off with Cohen. Since before she went off with Cohen. We were back again in front of the hotel. All the tables were set now, and already several were filled with people eating. Do look after Mike, Brett said. Don't let him get too bad. Your friends have gone upstairs, the German maitre d'hotel said in English. He was a continual eavesdropper. Brett turned to him. Thank you so much. Have you anything else to say? No, ma'am. Good, said Brett. Save us a table for 3, I said to the German. He smiled his dirty little pink and white smile. Is Madame eating here? No, Brett said. Then I think a table for 2 will be enough. Don't talk to him, Brett said. Mike must have been in a bad shape, she said on the stairs. We passed Montoya on the stairs. He bowed and did not smile. I'll see you at the cafe, Brett said. Thank you so much, Jake. We had stopped at the floor our rooms were on. She went straight down the hall and into Romero's room. She did not knock. She simply opened the door, went in, and closed it behind her. I stood in front of the door of Mike's room and knocked. There was no answer. I tried the knob, and it opened. Inside, the room was in great disorder. All the bags were opened, and clothing was strewn around. There were empty bottles beside the bed. Mike lay on the bed looking like a death mask of himself. He opened his eyes and looked at me. Hello, Jake, he said very slowly. I'm getting a little sleep. I've wanted a little sleep for a long time. Let me cover you over. No, I'm quite warm. Don't go. I haven't gotten to sleep yet. You'll sleep, Mike. Don't worry, boy. Brett's got a bullfighter, Mike said. But her Jewish chap has gone away. He turned his head and looked at me. Damn good thing. What? Yes, now go to sleep, Mike. You ought to get some sleep. I'm just starting. I'm going to get a little sleep. He shut his eyes. I went out of the room and turned the door to quietly. Bill was in my room reading the paper. See Mike? Yes. Let's go and eat. I won't eat downstairs with that German head waiter. He was damn snotty when I was getting Mike upstairs. He was snotty to us, too. Let's go out and eat in the town. We went down the stairs. On the stairs, we passed a girl coming up with a covered tray. There goes Brett's lunch, Bill said. And the kids, I said. Outside, on the terrace, under the arcade, the German head waiter came up. His red cheeks were shiny. He was being polite. I have a table for 2 for you gentlemen, he said. Go sit at it, Bill said. We went on out across the street. We ate at a restaurant in a side street off the square. They were all men eating in the restaurant. It was full of smoke and drinking and singing. The food was good, and so was the wine. We did not talk much. Afterward, we went to the cafe and watched the fiesta come to the boiling point. Brett came over soon after lunch. She said she had looked in the room and that Mike was asleep. When the fiesta boiled over and toward the bull ring, we went with the crowd. Brett sat at the ringside between Bill and me. Directly below us was the cajon, the passageway between the stands and the red fence of the barrera. Behind us, the concrete stands filled solidly. Out in front, beyond the red fence, the sand of the ring was smooth-rolled and yellow. It looked a little heavy from the rain, but it was dry in the sun and firm and smooth. The sword handlers and bull-ring servants came down the cajon, carrying on their shoulders the wicker baskets of fighting capes and muletas. They were blood-stained and compactly folded and packed in the baskets. The sword handlers opened their heavy leather sword cases, so the red-wrapped hilts of the sheaf of swords showed as the leather case leaned against the fence. They unfolded the dark-stained red flannel of the muletas and fixed batons in them to spread the stuff and give the matador something to hold. Brett watched it all. She was absorbed in the professional details. "He's his name stenciled on all the capes and muletas," she said. "Why do they call them muletas?" "I don't know." "I wonder if they ever launder them." "I don't think so. It might spoil the color." "The blood must stiffen them," Bill said. "Funny," Brett said, "how one doesn't mind the blood." Below, in the narrow passage of the cajon, the sword handlers arranged everything. All the seats were full. Above, all the boxes were full. There was not an empty seat except in the president's box. When he came in, the fight would start. Across the smooth sand in the high doorway that led into the corrals, the bullfighters were standing, their arms furled in their capes, talking, waiting for the signal to march in across the arena. Brett was watching them with the glasses. "Here, would you like to look?" I looked through the glasses and saw the 3 matadors. Romero was in the center, Belmonte on his left, Marcial on his right. Back of them were their people, and behind the banderilleros, back in the passageway and in the open space of the corral, I saw the picadors. Romero was wearing a black suit. His tricorned hat was low down over his eyes. I could not see his face clearly under the hat, but it looked badly marked. He was looking straight ahead. Marcial was smoking a cigarette guardedly, holding it in his hand. Belmonte looked ahead, his face wan and yellow, his long wolf jaw out. He was looking at nothing. Neither he nor Romero seemed to have anything in common with the others. They were all alone. The president came in. There was hand-clapping above us in the grandstand, and I handed the glasses to Brett. There was applause. The music started. Brett looked through the glasses. "Here, take them," she said. Through the glasses, I saw Belmonte speak to Romero. Marcial straightened up and dropped his cigarette, and looking straight ahead, their heads back, their free arms swinging, the 3 matadors walked out. Behind them came all the procession, opening out, all striding in step, all the capes furled, everybody with free arms swinging, and behind rode the picadors, their picks rising like lances. Behind all came the 2 trains of mules and the bull-ring servants. The matadors bowed, holding their hats on, before the president's box, and then came over to the barrera below us. Pedro Romero took off his heavy gold brocaded cape and handed it over the fence to his sword handler. He said something to the sword handler. Close below us we saw Romero's lips were puffed. Both eyes were discolored. His face was discolored and swollen. The sword handler took the cape, looked up at Brett, and came over to us and handed up the cape. "Spread it out in front of you," I said. Brett leaned forward. The cape was heavy and smoothly stiff with gold. The sword handler looked back, shook his head, and said something. A man beside me leaned over toward Brett. "He doesn't want you to spread it," he said. "You should fold it and keep it in your lap." Brett folded the heavy cape. Romero did not look up at us. He was speaking to Belmonte. Belmonte had sent his formal cape over to some friends. He looked across at them and smiled, his wolf smile that was only with the mouth. Romero leaned over the barrera and asked for the water jug. The sword handler brought it, and Romero poured water over the percale of his fighting cape, and then scuffed the lower folds in the sand with his slippered foot. "What's that for?" Brett asked, to give it weight in the wind. "His face looks bad," Bill said. "He feels very badly," Brett said. "He should be in bed." The first bull was Belmonte's. Belmonte was very good, but because he got 30,000 pesetas, and people had stayed in line all night to buy tickets to see him, the crowd demanded that he should be more than very good. Belmonte's great attraction is working close to the bull. In bullfighting, they speak of the terrain of the bull and the terrain of the bullfighter. As long as a bullfighter stays in his own terrain, he's comparatively safe. Each time he enters into the terrain of the bull, he's in great danger. Belmonte, in his best days, worked always in the terrain of the bull. This way he gave the sensation of coming tragedy. People went to the corrida to see Belmonte, to be given tragic sensations, and perhaps to see the death of Belmonte. 15 years ago, they said if you wanted to see Belmonte, you should go quickly while he was still alive. Since then, he has killed more than 1,000 bulls. When he retired, the legend grew up about how his bullfighting had been, and when he came out of retirement, the public were disappointed because no real man could work as close to the bulls as Belmonte was supposed to have done. Not, of course, even Belmonte. Also, Belmonte imposed conditions and insisted that his bulls should not be too large nor too dangerously armed with horns, and so the element that was necessary to give the sensation of tragedy was not there, and the public, who wanted 3 times as much from Belmonte, who was sick with a fistula, as Belmonte had ever been able to give, felt defrauded and cheated, and Belmonte's jaw came further out in contempt, and his face turned yellower, and he moved with greater difficulty as his pain increased, and finally the crowd were actively against him, and he was utterly contemptuous and indifferent. He had meant to have a great afternoon, and instead it was an afternoon of sneers, shouted insults, and finally a volley of cushions and pieces of bread and vegetables thrown down at him in the plaza, where he had had his greatest triumphs. His jaw only went further out. Sometimes he turned to smile, that toothed, long-jawed, lipless smile, when he was called something particularly insulting, and always the pain that any movement produced grew stronger and stronger, until finally his yellow face was parchment color, and after his second bull was dead and the throwing of bread and cushions was over, after he had saluted the president with the same wolf-jawed smile and contemptuous eyes, and handed his sword over the barrera to be wiped and put back in its case, he passed through into the cajon and leaned on the barrera below us, his head on his arms, not seeing, not hearing anything, only going through his pain. When he looked up, finally, he asked for a drink of water. He swallowed a little, rinsed his mouth, spat the water, took his cape, and went back into the ring. Because they were against Belmonte, the public were for Romero. From the moment he left the barrera and went toward the bull, they applauded him. Belmonte watched Romero, too, watched him always, without seeming to. He paid no attention to Marcial. Marcial was the sort of thing he knew all about. He had come out of retirement to compete with Marcial, Knowing it was a competition gained in advance, he had expected to compete with Martial and the other stars of the decadence of bullfighting, and he knew that the sincerity of his own bullfighting would be so set off by the false aesthetics of the bullfighters of the decadent period that he would only have to be in the ring. His return from retirement had been spoiled by Romero. Romero did always smoothly, calmly, and beautifully what he, Belmonte, could only bring himself to do now sometimes. The crowd felt it. Even the people from Biarritz, even the American ambassador saw it, finally. It was a competition that Belmonte would not enter because it would lead only to a bad horn wound or death. Belmonte was no longer well enough. He no longer had his greatest moments in the bull ring. He was not sure that there were any great moments. Things were not the same, and now life only came in flashes. He had flashes of his old greatness with his bulls, but they were not of value because he had discounted them in advance when he had picked the bulls out for their safety, getting out of a motor and leaning on a fence looking over at the herd on the ranch of his friend, the bull breeder. So he had 2 small, manageable bulls without much horns, and when he felt the greatness again coming, just a little of it through the pain that was always with him, it had been discounted and sold in advance, and it did not give him a good feeling. It was the greatness, but it did not make bullfighting wonderful to him anymore. Pedro Romero had the greatness. And let's find out more about that greatness tomorrow, same time and place, 5 Pacific at Fireside Reading on Instagram. We will read and complete this book on Friday, and then the weekend off, and a new book on Monday. I'll tell you what that is tomorrow. Can't wait to see you all. Until then, everyone, please stay very, very well.